Welcome back to our General Awareness course on the Transportation of Dangerous Goods Regulations. In this module, we will discuss some of the more useful exemptions written into the regulations. I will start this module with a pop quiz. Now we know that dangerous goods transportation is a complex business and that the TDG regulations are very detailed. That combination suggests a need for a lot of exemptions. How many special case exemptions are there? 9, 37, 49, or 76? If you said 37, give yourself a treat. You were right. But that 37 does not count exemptions buried in the details of the regulations. We've already established that there are exemptions, but I want to stress that you must read them closely, as most have limitations. Regarding exemptions, though, you will find the broadest ones in Part 1 of the regulations under Special Cases. Other exemptions are specific to certain goods and written next to the relevant sections. For example, Section 2.14.2 exempts soft drinks, tires, tennis balls, and light bulbs from being classified as compressed gases, Class 2.3. Now I'd like you to turn to page 6 of your participant guide. Here you'll find a list of all 37 special case exemptions. Go through the list and try to determine how many apply to your organization. My operation, which is very small and uncomplicated, there are 9 I find useful. 150 kilogram exemption, 500 kilogram exemption, limited quantities, samples for inspection investigation, samples for classifying, analyzing, or testing, and samples demonstration. And then transportation within the facility and operation of a means of transport. Larger operations may be able to use more. But I'd like to discuss some of the more commonly used ones in more detail. The first exemption I want to discuss is the 150 kilogram gross mass exemption. To start, let's define gross mass. This is the mass of the means of containment plus all of its contents. So for our gas cylinder, it is the mass of the cylinder itself plus the mass of the dangerous goods inside. So what are you exempt from? Well, you do not have to complete shipping documents, apply labels or placards, use the official containers, train staff, or report spills. That said, you are not exempt from classifying the dangerous goods or from the emergency response assistance plans, the latter of which we will discuss in a later module. There are, however, several conditions that accompany this exemption. To use this exemption, the dangerous goods must be in one or more small means of containment. Remember, we defined a small means of containment as having a volume equal to or less than 450 liters. Each small means of containment must be 30 kilograms or less, except for gases where this limit does not apply. And of course, the total mass must be 150 kilograms or less. In addition, the dangerous goods must be in a quantity or concentration available to the general public. This basically means a retail store. So if you recall from Module 1 when I asked, if the regulations apply everywhere, how can you transport a propane cylinder from Costco to your house? This is how. Whether you know it or not, you were using the 150 kilogram gross mass exemption. Lastly, there are a series of limitations on using the exemption that are shown on the slide. most common limitations are shown in larger type and say that this exemption cannot be used if you are shipping by air, your product requires an emergency plan, you are shipping a toxic gas like chlorine, you are shipping a flammable gas in a container that is over 46 liters. To put that in perspective, the large propane cylinders from retail stores are 90 liters. I will leave you to read the less common limitations on your own. So you can see that these exemptions can exempt you from a lot of regulations, but they do have conditions and you must read them closely. Our next exemption is the 500 kilogram gross mass exemption. Here, you do not have to complete shipping documents, apply placards, or use the official containers. You are not exempt from classifying the dangerous goods, applying labels, training, reporting, or emergency response assistance plans. As with the 150 kilogram exemption, the 500 kilogram exemption has a series of conditions, including each means of containment, other than for gases, has a gross mass under 30 kilograms. Each means of containment has a label. The consignment is accompanied by a shipping document or some other document that lists the primary class of the dangerous goods and the total number of containers. For example, a document that simply says Class 3 number means of containment 10, Class 8 number means of containment 12 would suffice. And of course, the gross mass of all dangerous goods must be less than or equal to 500. And just like the 150 kilogram exemption, the 500 kilogram exemption has the same limitations. Getting into other exemptions, we have the limited quantities exemption. This exemption means you do not have to complete shipping documents, apply labels or placards, use the official containers, train staff, have emergency plans, or report spills. You do still have to classify, though. Under what conditions would this exemption apply? Well, that requires a couple of definitions. First, an outer means of containment is the outermost container, while an inner means of containment is a container inside the outer container. Follow that? I don't blame you if you didn't. But let's take an example. Say you bought a case of wine. The outermost container is the box. The wine bottles themselves are inside the box, and thus they are the inner means of containment. So with those definitions out of the way, when would this exemption apply? It applies if the dangerous goods are in a proper means of containment, each outer means of containment, like the wine box, is under 30 kilograms, each inner means of containment, like the wine bottles, are under the value in Schedule 1. In this case, so long as the above conditions are met, there is no maximum for the mass of all of the means of containment taken together. Now, what is this value listed in Schedule 1? Let's take a look at methanol as an example. Looking in column 6A, we see a limited quantities index of 1 liter. If we're talking about a case of methanol, that means that each bottle of methanol must contain 1 liter or less, and the box must be 30 kilograms or less. And one final point, you must display the limited quantity symbol on the outer means of containment. This is a generic symbol that applies to all classes using this exemption. As a practical example, this is a picture of an Amazon package we received at our house that displays the limited quantity symbol. Now let's test our knowledge. Say I run motorcycle training courses at many sites. I need to transport gasoline to the sites to refill the motorcycles. I have a pickup truck and 30 20-liter gasoline containers. I do not want to train my workers in the transportation of dangerous goods. How much gasoline can we carry per trip? Do I need to take any special precautions? Let's take this one piece at a time. I have a pickup truck and 30 20-liter containers. The limited quantity index for gasoline, as you can see on the slide, is 30 liters, so each container is fine. What about special precautions? Well, I need to display the limited quantity symbol on each gas can. And that's it. But an issue. My pickup holds 60 liters of gas. That is larger than the 30-liter limited quantity limit. Does that mean I'm screwed? Remember, I suggested you read over the list of exemptions to see if any might be useful? How about number 1.27, operation of a means of transport? It says, these regulations do not apply to dangerous goods that are required for the propulsion of a means of transport and that are intended to remain on the means of transport until used and contained in a fuel tank permanently installed on the means of transport. Well, the gas in my pickup is intended to remain in there, at least until it is used. And my fuel tank is permanently installed on my truck. So there you go. My pickup is exempt from the regulations. There are a couple more exemptions I want to talk about. I want you to imagine you have a glass of whiskey in front of you. Now pick up the glass and take a drink. Wait, by moving the glass of 40% ethanol, you just transported dangerous goods from the desk to your mouth. But more practically, think about moving dangerous goods from the shelf to shelf within your warehouse. Do you need paperwork, training, etc. to do this? Again, exemptions to the rescue. This time 1.25, transportation within a facility. This exempts you from the whole regulation as long as you're moving dangerous goods from one place in your facility to another place in your facility. And your facility is a manufacturing or processing facility to which public access is controlled. That is, not a retail store. Saved again. But what if I operate two facilities that are separated from each other? Ever hear the phrase, there's an app for that? Well, there's an exemption for that. 1.28, transportation between two properties exemption. In this case, you are exempt from all parts of the regulations. What are the conditions with this exemption? You're exempt if I am the manufacturer, producer, or user of the dangerous goods. That is, not a retailer or wholesaler. I transport the goods less than or equal to 3 kilometers on a public road. I own or lease both properties. The goods are in proper means of containment. I advise the police in writing of the nature of the dangerous goods no more than 12 months in advance of the transport. and my vehicle has displayed on it the placard for the primary class of each of the dangerous goods, or the danger placard. And we'll be getting into placards in a later module. The last exemption I want to discuss is 1.33, Class 3 Flammable Liquids General Exemption. This exempts me from having to complete shipping documents, apply labels or placards, use the official containers, train staff, or file emergency plans. That said, you are not exempt from classifying the dangerous goods or from reporting. I can use this exemption when I transport Class 3 flammable liquids that have no subsidiary class, are in packing group 3, and have a flash point greater than 37.8. There is no limit on how much I can transport under this exemption. An example of this exemption in practice is diesel fuel, which has a flash point of around 50 degrees Celsius, depending upon where you buy it. From the Schedule 1 excerpt on the slide, you can see it is Class 3, Packing Group 3, and has no subsidiary class. So we are all good. As a counterpoint, below diesel on the slide, we can see gasoline. Although it is also a Class 3 product, at Packing Group 2, it does not meet the criteria to use this exemption. While the regulations contain many more exemptions, I've highlighted the major ones and tried to give you a taste of some of the complexities and conditions they impose. I want to end this module with another example. Suppose I have 7 old transformers containing 25 kilograms of PCBs each that I want to ship from Burnside Industrial Park in Dartmouth to Bears Lake Business Park in Halifax. Are there any exemptions that I can use? Some details on the load. The transformers are UN 2315, Class 9, Packing Group 2. The total mass is 175 kilograms, and I do not require any emergency plan. Let's go through some of the exemptions we discussed one at a time. First, what about the 150 kilogram gross mass exemption? Nope, too heavy. Okay, what about the 500 kilogram gross mass exemption? Okay, if I label the transformers. Can I use the limited quantities exemption? And no, too heavy. What about the transportation within a facility exemption? No, I'm moving the dangerous goods between 2 facilities. Lastly, can I use the transportation between 2 properties exemption? Again, no dice. Burnside to Bears Lake is more than 3 kilometers. So I can use the 500 kilogram gross mass exemption to reduce the number of regulations I have to follow. And that concludes our discussion of some of the exemptions written into the transportation of dangerous goods regulations. I invite you now to move on to Module 4, where we will discuss shipping documents.